Great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Just Transition Subcommittee meeting of the Vermont Climate Council. Today's Thursday, May 16th, 4 p.m. We do not have a quorum in this meeting, so we would need a total of 9 subcommittee members to make a quorum. We currently have 5. We may have a few folks join us late, so if at that point we do have a quorum, we'll make note of that in the recording. But our intention will be to kind of carry through most items of the agenda as they are updates and discussion of the guiding principles for subcommittee members that are not here. Looking forward to them watching the recording and hopefully having some learning opportunities and benefit from the discussion that we have around the guiding principles for a just transition. So everyone but Paula hopefully received the meeting materials. I can't even remember if it was the end of last week or early this week that they went out, which included the agenda, the meeting minutes, and a few other materials in preparation for today's meeting. So just a quick review of the agenda. We're primarily focusing this May meeting on kind of a review and discussion of the just transition guiding principles. So using this as an opportunity to kind of refamiliarize some of us and kind of introduce new subcommittee members to the guiding principles overall. And then we have a variety of Climate Action Office updates that Sophie and I will go through, including preparing for our June meeting, which is focused on the community engagement, public engagement updates from CBI, et cetera. I'm just going to take a quick pause in review of the agenda to welcome Denise. Good to see you, Denise.
Hi, folks. I'm sorry I'm late. I was driving. I'm here. Good to see you all.
Glad that you're here. Yeah, thanks. And then we have someone joined by phone, which is a 52295. Oh, that's you, Sophie. Gotcha. Got it. Okay, because great. So Paula, Denise, we were saying that we don't yet have quorum this evening, so we're going to not make any decisions during this meeting unless a few other folks join us, but continue in the agenda. So we'll start with the climate. We'll do the agenda and the review of the minutes. We'll do the climate action update around 4:25. We'll hopefully make the transition to a discussion of the guiding principles. Kelly was going to lead a part of that conversation, so we'll just have to check in about Kelly's availability to facilitate that piece of the discussion. Hold space for public comment at 4:50, and then we had envisioned a small group exercise, which again we may have to do a little modification of given our numbers this evening, and then wrap up, and maybe we'll even be a little earlier tonight given the lack of quorum, talking about our homework for the June meeting and what to expect for the rest of the summer. So any questions on the agenda? Great. Not hearing any. And then, so meeting minutes from April. So I'll put those in the chat. They're also linked in the agenda and were included in the meeting materials that were sent around. We do a pretty informal, just sort of review of minutes. So we don't do a approval. So any comments on the minutes or any questions about the minutes from April 18th? Okay, not hearing any. Carrie, thanks for taking minutes and for offering to do them again here in May. Appreciate that. Okay, well, let's move on to the climate action update of sort of what's to come in 2024. Sophie, are you feeling in a good spot to? Okay, great. Kick us off. You're still on mute. There we go.
Okay. Are you hearing me through my phone?
Yeah, perfectly.
Great. So I'll just share the screen so I can walk us through this email. Sorry, can you?
Yeah, so maybe while Sophie gets set up, Sophie had sent us an email earlier in May that shared a lot of important information, resources, and some next step action items that we wanted to just review in virtual person here, and kind of make sure we were clear about what was available for resources and then what maybe some of the next steps might be. Great, we can see your screen, Sophie.
Great. Okay, that looks okay. And you're seeing just that email section?
Yep.
Okay, great. So I know this is a lot of information, so we thought it would be helpful just to walk through this quickly. I think everybody who was here was at last meeting, so I believe everybody here is all caught up on that we're assigning or not assigning, but some people from Just Transition Subcommittee are stepping up as liaisons to other subcommittees as well to kind of ensure that themes of equity and questions of a just transition are integrated across subcommittees as they're doing their work. And we heard from a couple folks last meeting. I'll give a little update on that, who were interested in that. We also talked about this idea of kind of having a buddy system. So folks who would appreciate kind of having another point person on our committee to like connect one-on-one with, indicated their interest in that to me. So I have sent out emails connecting those pairs of people. If that is something we still have people who are unpaired, and that's totally fine. But if you are hearing this for the first time and you realize, oh, that's something that I'd like, just let me know, and we can continue to set those pairs of people up. Oh, we've got Sam joining us now. Another item in this list, so I had shared that there is this thing called the U.S. Climate Alliance. It's a collection of states who have said they all, as states, want to meet the agreements of the Paris Climate Accord. So that alliance came together after the United States pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement. So it's a membership of governors and state staff, etc. They have a Just Transitions working group, and they have just sort of staffed up the leadership of that. I think they kind of had an interim period where there wasn't, where maybe one leader had stepped out, and anyway, they've got their leadership kind of filled in for that. This person's name is Hannah Khalil, and Jane and I will be meeting with this person at the end of May. So we wanted to invite, if there's any Just Transition Subcommittee members who would like to join us for that, you're very much welcome to. I did not hear back from anybody by email, but if you're hearing this now and thinking that you would be interested in that, you can let me know. I'll just pause for a moment just to see if anybody is interested in that. I see Matthew's got a hand raised.
Yep, I don't mind joining that too as well. We got to have members of Vermont representing of Vermont, and it's pretty hard to do any of this work without a collaboration team in place. So yeah, I think this benefits everyone. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So Matthew, does it sound good if I forward that event invitation to you?
Yes, please. Because like I said,
Okay.
the more Vermonters, the more people we have to collaborate on a national scale, the better it is for everyone. Thank you.
Great, I'm adding it to my list. Great. Okay. The next item from this email is just a bunch more information for you. We've had a lot of questions about like what engagement is going to look like for the climate action plan update, and that's something that I support for the subcommittee and the Climate Council, but also involves all of you and the council playing a big role in that. So there's a whole bunch of resources in here that I attached. If you haven't had a chance to look at them yet, I would definitely encourage you to do so before our next meeting, because at our next meeting, we will hear from Consensus Building Institute, who does a lot of this engagement work on behalf of both the Climate Action Office and the Climate Council. So they're going to join us in June. Thanks to everybody who has filled out that reschedule poll so far. That was in an email I sent today, so if you haven't seen that yet, take a look, fill out the poll. I'll just point out a couple of these resources with background info on engagement. This presentation on YouTube was a meeting with the steering committee of the Climate Council, and I gave a brief presentation that kind of gives the broad brushstrokes of the engagement activities planned for the coming year that relate to both the Climate Action Plan and this different thing that state government is working on called the Resilience Implementation Strategy. So that's a quick 10-minute watch, and the slide that accompanies that is also attached right here as a PDF in the email. I also, Carrie met with me and helped me think through, we've got a lot more detail than this, and how to share that extra detail with you all in a meaningful way that also isn't too much and too so you don't have to sit through the weeds of everything. So I do have the option or the upcoming opportunity to share more detail with you all, but just need to work a little bit on materials to get that into a legible, understandable format. Next, we've got these quarterly engagement reports. There have been 3 so far since Consensus Building started their on-the-ground engagement work back in August of last year. So you may have already, if you've been on the subcommittee, you've probably seen 1 or 2 of those already. These are all linked. These all can be found at this link. And the most recent one came out just a little bit ago. So there's a whole lot of great information in there that I encourage you to check out. So this is a little bit of information about our work with the Environmental Justice the Environmental Justice Unit, and our cross-collaboration with them. If you're interested, the core principles of community engagement, which were drafted by their advisory council, are now under a public comment period. Of course, anybody's welcome to comment on that, so feel free to check it out. This next bullet is just highlighting that Consensus Building Institute will be joining us next month, and some more background information can be found in their presentation that they gave back in November. That's about a 20-minute watch if you want to check that out. Finally, this last one will be a really important mechanism for our collaboration on getting you all involved in engagement for the Climate Action Plan update. Consensus Building Institute shows up at events that are happening in various communities. So basically ones that are hosted by community-based entities, not by us, but maybe there's some tabling happening, maybe there's some opportunities for discussion. So Consensus Building Institute staff can go out and join in these events. So we get together this whole list of events that we plan to go to. We've got a couple on there for June, but we're still fleshing it out and populating it for the summer. If you have ideas for events that would make sense for us to show up at, we'd definitely love to hear. You can email that to me or to Kashka Orlo. And we'd really love to have subcommittee members across the council and councilors joining us at these events so that those direct engagement experiences can be had by subcommittee members as well. So that was a whole lot, but hopefully that was a little bit helpful to digest this email with a lot of information. I'll just pause if there are any questions, etc. Matthew, go ahead.
Yes, I do have a question that's very, very important to collaborate in all of this, given, Vermont's economics, are we stipend these? Are we going to pay people for these, to show up? I know that there are some stipulations on it, and we budget very, very light. I know we got to do some fundraising to make this, successful. How are we going to go about it? Because there's a lot of people with different scheduling and stuff, or on other committees, unlike myself, 10 plus, that may not have the time or, the, how should I say this? The, knowledge, or the, mental capacity to continue to put in extra work when I'm pretty much, already strapped thin. So that's just a big question. I know that many members are going to probably ask if they have the time and mean to do it when they're already stretched pretty thin. Thank you.
Thanks. That's a good question. I actually don't know about that answer for whether like joining us for one of these community events would qualify for a per diem. I will ask that. And about mileage reimbursement. There's another angle to your question that I can answer a little more. I'm not sure if this was your intention with the question, but in terms of like community members showing up to the event, for example, like if we're holding a focus group and we're asking Vermonters to come spend an hour of their time talking to us and sharing their valuable insights, we do have mechanisms to compensate community members for that through the contract. So we do have that set up, but I will get back to you on an answer of whether counselors and subcommittees time can be compensated with per diem for showing up at those events. I'll look into that.
Yes, thank you to this, Massey, because that's going to be basically the legit importance of our work moving forward. Is we got to compensate everyone. We can't do this half measured, because that's disrespecting and taking a lot of individuals' time away from a more important time that they may have committed to. So that's just one question that's very, very important moving forward. Thank you.
Yeah, I was actually wondering the same thing, Matthew, so I'm glad you brought that up.
I'm sorry, I cannot find the agenda. I had it up on my other computer and I had a technical problem, so I'm using a very old one. If someone could just re-put it in, because I was gonna make another comment about the community engagement, but I didn't know if we were gonna talk about that at a different time, or if we're gonna talk about it now, or if we're gonna talk. So thanks, sorry.
This is a good time. We'll get definitely deeper into it soon with our presentation from CBI and some more insight from me. But yeah, any comments welcome right now.
I will just really quickly say then that I also think, having been to the first meeting of a different subcommittee, that like thinking about questions that they might want to ask community members too, less so generally talking about climate change and talking about I guess experience is really important, but generally like less up here conversation and really specific questions that we might be able to really help craft action around in terms of hearing both from communities on priorities, and then also just understanding how the plan functions. If there are really specific questions, those are things that could also be like at the dump or at the bus stop or at the whatever, and like a really quick yes, no, or other fast style of engagement, which is not going to capture everybody, but could also help be another facet of this that's just not so demanding on people's time or ability to participate in a long way. And I mean, I spend so much time at the bus stop, like so it's late or whatever, or on the bus. I mean, I think there are lots of ways that are really effective. Definitely at the dump. It's a really common place that I run into a bunch of people from town at, like we chat. I mean, it's not a fast moving place. Like some people come in and out, but other people hang out for a few minutes. You might answer a question there. So just thinking about other venues, libraries, like stuff like that. I know that's really specific, but if we're just getting into that a little bit, it came up in a different conversation, and I wasn't sure if we talked about it here yet or not.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I don't know that we've talked about it with this group. I know you and I have talked about it, Sam. But that idea of getting, like, asking other subcommittees, like, what is it that you really want to hear from people about, and what input and feedback would be useful and could actually, like, influence, you know, the path you're taking as you're undertaking this update. And I can't remember if I sent this email yet or not, because there's so many emails. But I asked that of, I think, subcommittee co-chairs. I think it was to all subcommittee members in the email that I sent out with the quarterly report, the most recent one, which you all got. But as you all know, we don't all read email. It's easy to forget. It's a never-ending sea. So I think that would be another great role for liaisons to play in their subcommittees of, you know, as whoever is a liaison between this subcommittee and, let's say, ag and ecosystems or cross-sector mitigation. When you're in those meetings, making sure that there's an agenda item or bringing to them the question of, like, what are meaningful questions that you want to hear from people on, and helping me to keep track of those and letting me know what you're hearing, so that we can make sure that Consensus Building Institute, like, I think you all can play that role as well, like Sam's saying, like, oh, I'm just at the bus stop and I know what these questions are, so I could ask my neighbor. But also, if we can get those questions, we can make sure that Consensus Building Institute is prepared with those, which they really want to be, and can be asking those questions as they're doing this work. Carrie, go ahead.
I feel like I should know the answer to this question, but is there a place on the website where we can go to get this information? Or is it, like, scattered on the website? Because I'm, like, just taking the notes, like, thinking about, like, wow, this is a lot of stuff. And it's hard
Yeah,
to
you mean
back
all
on
the
the
stuff that I
emails.
shared in the email?
What?
Do you mean all the stuff that I shared in the email?
Yeah, like, where would you, if, let's say, you didn't want to search your email inbox, but you wanted to look at all of our documents, like, it's like some of them are in the meeting notes, but, like, these aren't all in the meeting notes. So do we have a place where we put them? Should we have a place where we put them?
Sure. I'm not sure that I can really, like, do much on
Yeah.
that front. One resource is on the climate change website. There's the resources page. And so that's where you'll find all the quarterly reports. That's where kind of, like, official, like, very important documents are. Thanks, Paula, for putting that link in the chat. So all the quarterly reports that I mentioned are on there. This email that I compiled for you, like, I had to go through YouTube and find the right links to put in the email to send to you. So really, that's going to be, like, your best thing. Like, I don't have a universal page where this all is, or I would send it to you. And that's, I think, part of, yeah, I don't know, like, what the rules are about that too, with, like, subcommittees. Like, all of the documents live on the climate change website according to, like, the meeting that they happened in. I don't find that to be, like, a very helpful way to find something at one's fingertips. So I think it's just really up to you as an individual to figure out how to keep track of these materials in a way that works best for you. I'm sorry, I don't have a better system to offer, but this is kind of the thing of, like, it's a council thing.
Maybe at least I can work with you on these minutes to get all of the links for all the things we talked about in the notes?
Sure, I'll forward you the email.
No, I have it, but I can.
Oh, good.
I
Okay.
can copy and paste it in, but just as we go on, there might even be other things like the guiding principles and things like that, and just finding out where those are linked so people can access them easier. Maybe I'm just speaking for myself.
Well, no, I think it is kind of like a bigger picture of trying to make resources accessible, like information accessible, so that, we're not, like, for example, like I left Paula off the distribution list for whatever reason. And so she didn't get the agenda and the minutes and the resources. And, that's, both like human error, which happens, but it's also would be nice if we had some redundancy. I mean, I know the minutes and the agenda themselves are posted on the Climate Action office website, but not any of the other content, which I think to your point, Carrie, is like there's other resources that we're sharing or the other events and activities that we're discussing that would be great to have like some overlapping locations where people can go to access resources that might be relevant both to subcommittee and task group members, but also members of the public.
Yeah, I agree with that would be great. Just speaking for myself, I know I'm kind of at capacity with like what I'm putting forward for this subcommittee. So I'm not sure that I'm like able to take on a task of that size. If somebody wants to do that, I don't know what the mechanism is, but I welcome that support.
Yeah, I hear you, Sophie, that this is not a task that we've assigned or identified a home for yet, but I think an important thing to consider, whether when we find capacity or maybe even a solution that doesn't take a lot of effort, but does make resources more available.
Yeah, I definitely agree that it's very scattered, and like I don't find the calendar to be an effective way to find the resources that you're looking for at one's fingertips. And the resources page has some things, and you can sort it by just transition subcommittee, but it doesn't have everything by any means.
Great. I think this is an important piece for ongoing discussion. I want to just note really quickly a piece related to your question and suggestion, Sam, and then Sophie, maybe turn it back to you for the last update piece, I think, which is related to when liaisons should be anticipating starting to attend meetings. So the only piece I wanted to follow up with was, since our June meeting is focused on the community engagement, one of the homework assignments that we will all have as Just Transition subcommittee members is to think about, are there particular questions that we would want CBI to be asking of Vermonters when they're out doing community engagement visits? So I will include that in the agenda that will go to everyone next time in preparation for our June meeting. I will do like maybe one other heads up that I don't know that this email has gone out yet, Sophie, but that we are looking at changing the date and or time of our June meeting due to just schedules and conflict. So you will be seeing, has that gone out yet, Sophie, or not yet?
Yes. Yep, that went out today. So if folks could fill out that poll by the end of day Monday,
okay,
then I will send out a meeting invite once we've got the date that works the best for the most people.
Great. Thank you for doing that, and for everyone proactively appreciative of you taking the time to complete the poll for our June meeting. So Sophie, I know that one of the questions, I'm looking at time, but I also think this is important, that there was some question and felt like opportunity for clarity or clarification around, if we have a liaison assignments, when should we start attending those meetings? Is that immediately, or what does that look like?
Yes, and let me pull up what that looks like. What we're going to be showing the steering committee on Monday, this coming Monday. Sorry, just give me one moment to pull that up.
Yeah.
So once the steering committee approves this, which won't be any problem, folks can start attending their liaison meetings. This is kind of my first time like setting this up. So I'm not sure if I just connect the liaisons directly with the subcommittee co-chairs or, you know, how exactly best to make that introduction. But, oh, I have this up, so I'll share my screen so you can see as a refresher from last time for who indicated interest. Hopefully this isn't too small for anybody, but let me know if I need to zoom in. In agriculture and ecosystems, we had Abby express interest. In cross-sector mitigation, Callie expressed interest by email, and Sam. Just transitions, we don't need one. Rural resilience and adaptation, we had Anna, Danielle, and Kelsey, with the note that Danielle can just do during the summer. And Paula's already on this subcommittee as well. And then we don't have any JT member with science and data, but Claire McElvaney, who serves as staff support for Just Transitions on science and data. So there is potential for, you know, another Just Transitions person liaison here. It's also okay if nobody has that extra capacity, and maybe agriculture and ecosystems so that it's not just Abby. Go ahead, Kelsey.
I'm happy to switch if need be. So last year we did not attend these meetings as liaisons.
I think it's a great question, Kelsey. I think, gosh, maybe Carrie and I and others that have been here before a longer time can remember. I think we did have representation from Just Transition attending other subcommittees when the climate action plan was being developed and the recommendations were being drafted. Then there was this period of time where some of these other subcommittees weren't meeting as regularly because the climate action plan had been completed. And so there was this kind of gap of groups weren't meeting. There wasn't a lot that it was really clear for how Just Transition could engage and be valuable. And now that we're looking at the next iteration and revision to the plan, it's feeling like a time for all subcommittees to start re-engaging in meeting regularly and an opportunity for Just Transition liaison to those subcommittees.
Okay. As far as introducing, I feel like at the last meeting, I got excited about this part of it, like being like the representative of Just Transitions in other meetings. And so I don't know if it would make sense to be like, you know, this is the role of this person, and like they're going to look from the lens of this rubric, and they're your friend, you know, like something like that. And but this is important to our work, and I don't know, that's what I gathered we would say, like that, just to like, they're not just like a fly on the wall, they want to be engaged. Yeah.
I appreciate that suggestion, Kelsey. Sam, and then I have a thought to offer too.
I was just gonna apologize. I got connected somehow, and so I went to the cross sector one today. So I want to apologize first if I messed anything up, and B, I just introduced myself as a member of Just Transitions when they called on me to introduce myself, and I didn't say that I was a liaison or anything like that. But at some point,
okay.
I don't think so. But at some point during the meeting, they're like, "Yeah, so we have Sam as the whatever, and then maybe someone else." And then so I don't know. They had several other representatives from other committees there, and maybe I don't know what, but it seemed like there was like Jared from Science and Data was at cross sector, and like they had the whatever. So I don't know if it's just that committee or whatnot, but I can at least say that there was a welcome reception that I wasn't attending. I was intending to just like hang out and listen and learn, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it's like for the other ones, but and I also wanted to apologize if I messed anything up, but someone connected me and
No.
Melissa invited me, so I was like, all right, cool, fine. But
No, that's great. And I can add that at the Climate Council meeting in January that I heard several councilors express that their, subcommittees are looking forward to just transitions support and really wanting that presence. So that's, good sign.
it would be nice to have a clear sense that we all build together of what our role, like of like common potential practices. Like I was thinking they were having these big discussions about priorities, and I tried really hard not to say anything, but in my head I was thinking, wow, this is like really big scale, which makes sense, but also they keep forgetting about people. And like I could see like with an addition of like 2 or 3 words here, and like how do we provide those recommendations? Is it in the conversation? Is it after the fact? Do we follow up? Maybe that doesn't work for all groups. Like what are the common types of, I don't know, things that we might do? And then also are we also making sure that we're making recommendations that fit? Like, can we pass them through this group first so they've gone through the diverse perspectives we have here, which is perhaps broader than some of the other, maybe not, I don't want to make any assumptions about the other committees, but yeah, I would really love to like present them to you all first and then pass them on from all of us versus just through me as a filter.
I think sometimes though, okay, I'll share this. I joined at one point when we stopped going, well, maybe the other subcommittees weren't meeting that often. There were task groups that were formed where a lot of the work was happening in the interim. And so I joined the Municipal Vulnerability Index task group as the representative for just transitions. And I'll say, yeah, it was a little awkward because I felt like I was a little bit on an island because people are like really far down the road of developing this process. And then I tried to bring up questions of equity and it was like, yeah, it's not really what we're talking about now. But then I also felt like if I waited and like brought it back to the committee and then made comments, like the opportunity would be lost. So I think there has to be some collective trust that everybody who's here is here for the right reasons. And even if what you bring up or what you comment isn't perfect, it's like way value added.
I appreciate that. I just went to some of the MVI trainings for the RPCs and I have some feelings.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, this was great feedback. Kelly, I see your hand. Are you able to hop on for a moment?
I think I can unmute for a minute. I'm still in unruly children attending land. I'm sorry about that. Schedules did not align with my husband and me today. Yeah, I what I've been thinking about is the fact that my experience of folks on other subcommittees is that they want to be thinking about equity and they are doing their best, but they're also thinking about all these other things like emissions reduction and how to do rural planning and development. And so they have a lot going on in their heads. And so having somebody who's like, I got it, you got a lot going on in your heads, you're trying to think about equity, but maybe that isn't always the top thing on your mind. I'm here to help you remember those things and consider something that might not have popped up in your brain because of all this other stuff going on. We can't all think about all the things at all the time or we go crazy. So just having that as a mutual support thing and a trust, I think, Carrie, you said that. And then I also think, yeah, so saying something when there's something to bring it up and you can feel brave to do that, but also having us as a subcommittee as a collective support mechanism. So if there's something where you're feeling like, I don't know, should I say something, or I didn't feel comfortable saying something, but this is what I heard, what should I do? And just knowing that this subcommittee is your support, your backup, and can help with anything. And if there is something that seems like, wow, we definitely need to say something before this plan goes any further because they're missing something and they're not hearing our concerns, we can bring our collective voice to help help in that conversation. So anyway, I bet you did great at that meeting at the cross sector. They've had a lot of liaisons in the past from a bunch of different subcommittees just because they are cross sector. And I used to be the liaison, so it was fun, and they are used to having liaisons participate fully in the subcommittee work as well. So yeah, all right, I gotta get on mute because my toddler's doing crazy stuff again. He missed his nap today, so fun times.
So I'm just gonna put, I see your hand, Matthew, and I see a great question from Kelsey in the chat, but it's 4:51. So I just want to take a quick pause since in our agenda, we had dedicated time at 4:50 for public comment. I'm not seeing members of the public here, but I just want to hold space just for a minute or so in case someone were to pop on, or in case anyone has any public comment that they want to provide. I'll probably just wait about a minute or so. Okay, I'm not seeing or hearing any comments, questions, or concerns from public comment. So, Matthew, I want to go to your hand that was up.
Yes, it's called, in the last, before we went to public comment, she's right. It's called conflicting access needs. It's you got world rules and brain rules. Unfortunately, world rules don't intersect very well with brain rules, the way we think, of how to do this, collaboratively, because it's too confusing and too complex. World rules, which is, the state itself, assumes that you can do all this stuff. I assume you're gonna get a PhD and live the high life of you doing, wonderful things. But brain rules, which is us, individuals, ourselves, see this as, I see this as a conflicting, because I can't do what the state wants me to do. They suspect me to do it, but I can't because I don't have the capacity to do it, or the learning capability to do it, or the skills, because that's who I am. But world rules, the state assumes that you can do it regardless. So having that, it's called, it's very, very counterintuitive of conflicting access needs of the individuals and the parties, of where do we go from here. So what I see is, trying to collaborate on a way where brain rules, which is us, our minds, the way we think, to be able to translate that to world rules, the state, to understand us better. And if we can get the state itself, which is world rules, to understand our brain access needs, or just conflicting access needs in general, we'll be able to have a more mutual understanding with each other, instead of trying to assume this is the right course of action to take. Thank you.
Thanks, Matthew. So there's been some clarification or reiteration in the chat that the Climate Council Steering Committee meets on Monday, May 20th. And at that time, liaisons, at least those that have been identified in the chart that Sophie just shared with us, will be confirmed, or confirmed, I guess is the term that you use, Sophie. And then at that point, then there would be an introductory email that's sent to the co-chairs of the other subcommittees, connecting co-chairs and the Just Transition liaisons. And I'm assuming at that point, then those of us that are liaisoning would be receiving meeting invitations from those co-chairs for when those subcommittee meetings are next scheduled. And I think there was a suggestion or two of whether And I don't know if we can impart an agreement around a suggestion, given that we don't have quorum, but that there'd be some opportunity for conversation around how liaisons want to interact with the subcommittee. So I think, Sophie, you just suggested, could that just be a conversation between the co-chairs and the liaisons for the specific subcommittee, whether that's time on the agenda or more organic, kind of just pipe up and offer comment like you had questioned, Kelsey. Seems like that may differ depending upon the dynamic of the subcommittee, the individuals, the co-chairs, and the liaison themselves. Does that feel like an accurate kind of summary of what we've talked about? Does that answer the questions that folks had around the liaison role? Yeah, Kelsey.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I think hopefully the members of this group will feel comfortable speaking up. So, but if not, it might be nice to have a time slot. But also it might put pressure on you that it's like your slot. So I don't know, it could go both ways, but if there's like multiple ways to give feedback in case, like even like, I can't answer that right now, but I'll write you guys an email after in case you can't really understand everything that just happened or you don't do public Zoom speaking very well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And Anna, welcome. We did review kind of that, now I forget, but Sophie can remind us which subcommittee liaison you were in. Was it rural resilience?
I was going to say I expressed interest in rural resilience, but I'm also willing to be pushed around somewhere else if there's a gap.
Okay. We did talk about there being a gap in science and data and possibly a second backup under agriculture and ecosystems. Not that means that you need to be the one to move, Anna, but that was the quick summary of.
I don't have expertise in either of those, but I will think about it tonight. And I think maybe Paula had her hand up.
I missed it. Yeah, please, Paula.
Yeah, I did because I wasn't sure if I was officially a liaison or not to rural resilience, but I think my question has been answered just by looking at the sheet, so that's fine. The other question that I have is, do we have a quorum now?
So let's see.
That's a distraction. Maybe we don't need to, but
maybe once we stop sharing the screen, it's easier for me to count names and faces. All right, so we have one.
It's saying 11 participants.
Yeah, and we have 8 subcommittee members. I will note, and I hate to take up meeting time for this, in the chart that you had, Sophie, it showed us with 14 members, which would mean we'd only need 8 for a quorum. I, for whatever reason, had in my notes that we were now a subcommittee of 16 members and we needed 9 for a quorum. So I'm not sure. Oh gosh, I'm sorry. We should have that figured out. Wait, Sophie, we can't hear you. Sorry.
Whoops. It's confusing because the member number in that document doesn't include the co-chairs. So
Okay.
with the co-chairs, that's 16.
Gotcha. That's what Kelly thought. So we do still need 9 then for quorum, and we have less than that. So we still don't have quorum for the meeting, unfortunately. But it seems like we're able to still discuss the things we want to discuss. We have a recording for those that aren't here that will be able to get caught up as best they can. Okay. That felt like a.
And
yeah.
Sorry, if I could chime in with one thing to follow up on what Paula said. Paula, I think I partly missed you because you had already been on the subcommittee, but there was also some discussion since there were so many people interested in rural resilience and adaptation, and I know that Abby and Kelly have also been seeking support in the co-chair role and wanting to transition out of that, you had expressed, oh, maybe since there's a lot of interest in rural resilience and adaptation from other people, maybe that could free you up to step into a co-chair or co-chair support role. So that was what was also in my mind.
Yep. Yeah, so that's in flux still, it sounds like, but yeah, we can follow up separately by email. Great,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying. Okay. Sophie, thanks for that update. I think there was actually quite a bit of content there in the Climate Action Office update. So we did intend for a majority of this meeting, and I think we still can kind of make the transition now to really focusing on kind of a review and a bit of a discussion around the Just Transition guiding principles, which were developed by the subcommittee a bit ago. So I think finalized just under 2 years ago, and feel like a real critical backdrop and foundation for both obviously the work that we're doing within the subcommittee, but also some of those liaison functions to other subcommittees. And so we wanted to kind of like review the document. Hopefully many of you have had a chance to look through it if you weren't familiar with it in advance of tonight's meeting. You also hopefully spent a little time thinking about which of the principles kind of like spoke most to you, and we wanted to create, a little space for people to sort of share that. And then have a conversation around whether there's room for improvement within these guiding principles, acknowledging that it's designed to be a living document, so not just created and then considered final, but if there's plain language improvements or concepts that could be clarified or concepts or a framework that's missing, we wanted to kind of create an opportunity for that to be considered and reviewed. We had intended to spend a chunk of time doing that and then a chunk of time in some breakout conversations, which was an exercise that Carrie had suggested, which I was really excited about, which would be to actually take an example circumstance, here comes Mona, and sort of take a test, a run at actually using some of the guiding principle framing questions to an actual task. So, hi Mona.
Hello.
See you.
Sorry, I am just running from another meeting, so I'm really
Doing
sorry.
great. We're happy to
Thank
see you. Yeah, no
Thank
worries.
you. Thank you.
You might be the magic number though, Mona, that brings us to quorum this evening.
Oh, I wanted to attend since 4 o'clock. I couldn't. I'm sorry.
All right. Yeah, no, I'm not. I don't want you to
Yes.
feel guilty. I just want to note that like you bring magic to the meeting of now
Thank
9
you.
subcommittee members.
You're
Everyone
so
brings magic.
kind. So kind. Not to make me feel guilty or something. Thank you.
Not at all. No. So I just want to do a check-in. I don't think that between now and 6, we're going to be able to do a full expression of both those activities, both review and discussion and updates to the document and a breakout of some kind where we take a sample kind of recommendation from the climate action plan and apply the principal assessment questions. Does anyone have a recommendation for what would be most helpful in the remaining time that we have, giving us a few minutes? We don't need 15, but maybe 3 minutes at the end of the meeting for next steps and what's upcoming for our next meeting. I see hands from Matthew and then from Kelly. So some suggestions of
Yes. Let's review the guiding principles and see if it's adequate for plain language. That's my biggest pet peeve, and believe me, if that's not very accessible, nobody's going to get what we're talking about. And that could ultimately fail on our behalf. And we can't do that. We're committed to the state, but we're also committed to everyone else that's living in here and their access need of this information that we're about to give to them. So I think with me, and this is my suggestion, equity and plain language work hand in hand. And if we get our languages right, perfectly or aligned to that individual that we're talking to about, it will be just basically it'll be very successful. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. think we would agree the plain language kind of accessibility piece to these guiding principles is really critical. Kelly, do you have suggestions for kind of where to proceed?
Yeah, I was going to suggest that it might be helpful if I went over just a little bit of the document, how it was created, since I was there. Mona, were you on the subcommittee when we worked out these principles, or did you come after? I can't remember.
No, I came after.
Okay. So I might be like the only legacy person here tonight. And just talking about how it came about, and what my sense, at least, and only speaking from my personal sense of what was intended, about how it might be used when it was created. That doesn't mean that's how it has to be used going forward, but just to give some background context of how it came about, and why and what. And I can do that pretty quickly, hopefully, if I'm not interrupted by children, but that limiting thing until my husband gets home in a few minutes, I'm kind of here and there.
Yeah, I appreciate both your suggestion, Kelly, of kind of intent behind the guiding principles, and then Matthew's suggestion about kind of doing a quick review for its accessibility in plain language. Paula, additional suggestion?
Yeah. So I guess what I'm thinking about, so I see Sam said something that feels a little bit similar in the chat. I'm not sure that the best use of our time right at this minute is doing the plain language, because I completely agree that like a plain language review is needed for this document. But before we sort of like figure out, well, who should we be writing it for? Like, we need to figure out how it's going to be used, basically. And so talking more about the application of it, I think makes sense before we go in and start digging into, okay, for the intended audience of this document, how should it be worded?
Okay. I appreciate that as well. I think there are probably, and that does align with what Sam's post was in the chat, which is discuss how and if it can be used before we dedicate time to overhauling. And the overhauling, I think, is connected to the plain language piece. So yeah, so let's take Kelly up on her offer to walk us through a little bit of the intention around the guiding principles, and then let's spend some time doing a kind of a review and scan of the document, and then let's try to save about 20 minutes if we can. I'd like to still try to do the big picture question of how we might apply this in a specific recommendation. And Sophie has a, we came up with an example that around weatherization that we wanted to try. So Kelly, how's your availability to kind of speak to the intention of the guiding principles?
I'm going to do my best. I'm going to share my screen, but I'm going to keep it off, keep my camera off, and there may be some background noise from my little one. Okay, so everyone's seeing the Just Transitions Principles document.
Yes.
So I figured this might be helpful because I can walk through it, sort of how it came about. I think we started with a couple things. The key terms were important for context. And we also, I think one of the things, yes, this background noise, I don't know if you can hear. One of the things that I think we may have actually started with was, who are Vermont's frontline and impacted communities? And we made this word cloud partly based on how many times we heard these words from different folks that we talked to. People on the subcommittee, I think we may have pulled some other people. Mind you, this was 4 years ago, so my memory is a little bit rusty. And said interruption in the background was not even born yet. And that way, so that was also a little distracting. So this was really helpful. And then this part also saying basically that impacted and frontline communities are people who are highly exposed to climate risk, such as health impacts, flooding, and extreme temperatures, experience oppression and racism, are excluded from opportunities, or have less resources to adapt to climate and economic change. They bear the brunt of pollution and negative effects from today's fossil fuel and extractive economies and are more likely to experience a job transition as Vermont addresses climate change. So that's sort of a unifying, those are some unifying things that are going to help us identify who we are wanting to support in this work and lift up. And so then we also talked a lot about these terms, which are really helpful for context setting, the different types of equity. So distributive equity, basically saying not everybody is getting equal, or not even equal, but equitable amounts. Not everyone's getting what they need. Let's recognize this. Let's learn more about this, because it's sometimes people don't realize this is happening. It's invisible to them. And so the distributive equity would be trying to make sure that resources are, or adaptation and mitigation is going to the people who are needing those the most. Procedural equity is, this is where plain language comes in. If you can't participate in what's going on for any reason, because you're not being invited into the conversation, or you don't have access, you maybe don't speak the language, you maybe don't have access to the technology that you need to go to a Zoom meeting, any of those things, that's, so making sure that everyone has access to these, to be part of this, and has access to the resources, the conversation, and the whatever policies and things come out of what we do. That's procedural equity, that they're part of the process and embedded in the process. And anyone jump in if I'm not summing it up in an accurate enough way. Contextual equity. So this is looking at what is the context that that people are in, and understanding that the context to that, say a white person who comes from a middle class household, their context is going to be different from a Black or Indigenous or LGBTQ person from low income rural house, right? There are so many different contexts that we all come from, and recognizing the differences that may cause for our needs, what we have access to, all of that, and trying to make sure that we develop plans and services and things to take those differences into account. Corrective equity, and this is trying to make sure that we are actually correcting for the harms and the inequitable status quo, is how I would sum it up. So anyone have anything to add or correct about what I said? Because I'm off the cuff here at the end of a very crazy day.
I think that was wonderful, Kelly.
Okay, cool. I think those are helpful, and I like to look back at them a lot, because it's something that I think this page in general has just been really helpful for me to come back to again and again, because I don't always, they're big words, but they're really they're helpful words, and I think having specific language is good if we all understand and can come to as much of a common understanding of the terminology as possible. But it can be overwhelming if you're looking at it for the first time. So justice, environmental justice. So that's the equitable access to environmental benefits. And then climate and energy justice. So these are some other, I'm not sure I can sum these ones up off the cuff. So I think maybe if we take a minute to just look through it, I'll just leave it here for a minute. Can people read it well enough, or should I blow it up?
Yeah, maybe if you blow it up one notch, that's perfect.
Better?
Yep. I also put the link in the chat for folks that wanted to pull it up themselves.
And I know having people read things is also probably not the best for the equity thing. I don't know if anybody wants to take a stab at this one, summing it up out loud for folks who maybe are not as fast of a reader.
I was just gonna ask, did everyone have a chance to review this ahead of time? Because
Yeah, we don't have to go into it too in depth either.
I did. Apparently Sue Minter worked on this, so I saw
Yeah.
this like almost as soon as I got to Capstone.
Yes, Sue was instrumental in developing this, and so she was a co-chair of the subcommittee at the time. I unfortunately missed a little bit of the key work because I was on parental leave. So this is also why I'm my 4 years and having missed part of it is also why I'm not as eloquent as I'd like to be. So I'm gonna go back to my original aim here, which was to talk about how we developed this. So then we talked about the different principles, and this I was definitely a part of, which was these really big top line ones, that what the Climate Council should be working on. It needs to be inclusive, transparent, and innovative engagement. So the way we engage with people needs to be all of these things. And that is where that's definitely a growing edge. But I've been really excited to see the work that people like Sophie and Consensus Building Institute are doing in that area, and other areas of the other state agencies, I think, have actually taken inspiration from some of this to try to include some of this in their engagement work as well. And Claire could tell us about that too if she were here. It needs to be accountable and restorative. So being accountable to the folks that we're serving, and that's all of Vermont, right? But also restorative, and that is to help restore some of the things, the harms that have been done in perpetuating the status quo that is inherently inequitable. So trying to make things better instead of just saying, well, we're not making them worse anymore, right? Moving at the speed of trust. And that's important, is I think that especially we were on a really short timeline when we were doing this, and this was a really tough one. We had a deadline that we had to meet or the state would get sued. And it was really hard to figure out how to balance that. And so that's, I think, part of where Just Transitions, we can help with our liaison roles a lot in helping the people who are working on the other subcommittees to take a deep breath, slow down, and do some of that outreach, build that trust with whoever they identify as impacted communities for whatever they're working on. And solidarity, which is different from trust. It's including people and having spaces for all traditions and cultures, and particularly for Indigenous communities. That's what was written here, but I think that it can potentially be broadened as well. And just making sure that we are recognizing that all of our communities are integral to a healthy and vibrant Vermont. The most impacted first. I think most impacted first is actually one of the ones that, in my experience on some of the other subcommittees, that one is like one of the easiest for people to grab onto in their minds, is trying to, they don't always know who's most impacted, but that one I think is like, what do I need to do? Oh, who's most impacted? Let's make sure they get it first. And so, I actually, I had a conflict in my mind as the representative for the small business community. I wanted businesses to get some weatherization money, but I had to say, low income and rural Vermonters need it way more. They're the most impacted. So I was like, oh, am I doing my job as the small business representative? But also I'm on the Just Transition subcommittee, and also I'm a compassionate human being, and I have to recognize that the low income rural Vermonters definitely need help with weatherization. They need to be first. So supporting workers, families, and communities. So this one is also, it seems like it has some overlap with some of the others, and I mean, they all do, they all tie together. But just focusing on the fact that we're part of communities, we're all part of, we have families, and we want to be living and working here in Vermont and be happy and healthy and prosperous. And that involves supporting all of these networks that we're part of. So then we developed these self-assessment questions. So all of these principles, that's a lot of words. They're awesome. They're great. I would say, you know, make it part of your daily meditation, but the questions were where it started to sort of crystallize in my mind as something where I go, okay, I could use these questions. I could look at an actual policy proposal or something, and I could go through and I could look at these questions and answer them. And you could do it. And this is where it gets to the question of how are these being used? Is it, do I do this myself as a reflection? And then does every subcommittee member do this themselves and then come together and talk about it as a group? Do we do it as a group in a public meeting? How we go through these all together and have conversations? How should these be used? And that's the big open question. But these questions go through a lot of the principles, but ask some more targeted questions that we can try to home in on what we're actually trying, you know, how something in particular is going to impact people. And these were where we, sweetie, I'm talking. This is the Climate Council, yes. This is where we work extra hard on trying to get the plain language in there. I think in the questions, we definitely went through this and did a lot of updates on plain language, and I'm sure there's always room for improvement. And then the very last thing, the scoring rubric, this was not made by the subcommittee as a whole. This was something that Kaya Morris, who was a subcommittee member, and then actually ended up being a contractor helping the other subcommittees implement and use this whole thing as a tool for some of their really key recommendations in the first climate action plan. So she helped develop it, and this was almost, as far as I can recall, almost entirely her design. The rubric was just another tool to be used if it made more sense. I don't think it was to be used instead of or in addition to necessarily the questions. It was just another way to look at the questions, and if this is how your brain works, this could be a tool that you could use, and it's similar to the questions, not exactly the same. And the scoring was just meant to give you like a quick temperature check, I think, and then you could fill in comments. So again, would I do this myself? And each subcommittee member would do it themselves, and then we come together and talk about our responses. Would we all do this as a group? That is another open question. Does it need to be used every time, or is this an optional tool that you would just use when it seemed like the right thing, or if this is the way your brain works? So I think that's basically that's my sense of how it came about from my memory, which is obviously not perfect. But that's sort of, hopefully that summed it up and made some infographic for me. Sorry, I just saw the chat, and made a little bit of context for the background of how this was developed. And yes, Sue Minter could tell you lots because she was deeply involved in this. So maybe Denise, maybe we could invite her, because I know she's not busy at all, to a meeting to give some background.
The way she looked over it with me was wonderful. I would love for you all to have that experience as well. She likes to talk about it. She likes to talk about the background of the work they did. So yeah, if she can, she's pretty busy. I would love to present the idea to her.
I think that'd be great, Denise.
Cool.
And I just want to offer one quick addition, Kelsey, and then I see your hand, that on the page that is entitled Section 4, Guiding Principles for a Just Transition, it had 3 bullets that I think are really helpful for me, like from a process standpoint, as like how these guiding principles or assessment questions or scoring rubric, depending on which strategy or approach makes the most sense to you, is that these principles set expectations regarding how the Vermont Climate Council and its subcommittees will conduct their work, what recommendations are made by the council, and how investments, implementation, and oversight of the climate action plan occurs, or climate action plans occur, knowing that we'd have iterative planning processes. So I think that to me is helpful when I think about like, how do these get applied? It's both how the council does its work, it's how the recommendations that are made by subcommittees are drafted, and then how the work is implemented and investments are made. Yeah, Kelsey.
Yeah, thanks. That was a great explanation, Kelly. So when these were developed, I know it was pretty quick, but did you run through scenarios of how it could be used, like Carrie's suggesting? I'm just curious, like, you know, it's nice that it's use it how you see fit, but also it might be helpful to have like the data of like, we were at 1 out of 10 and now we're at 10 out of 10. I don't know, like looking at like, and proof that we like this work is being done. So if we all did the rubric or we all did the, you know, it a certain way, we would have it be more standard rather than like every group doing it differently. So I was just curious if you ran through scenarios to see how to apply it.
Yeah, I don't recall for sure. I don't recall doing that, although as I said, I was on parental leave for a few weeks. I do know that there are recordings of some of Kaya's work with the subcommittees. So I don't know if anyone in our leader planning meeting, we talked about them, but I don't know if anyone has located them. That would be a cool thing to review and see how she did it. And again, doesn't have to be done that way, but to see it happening in real time. I know the time that we had someone come to our meeting to go through the scoring rubric. It was like really hectic, and it was partly because he was driving through the mountains of Maine at the time. But that was a big learning of, wow, that was a good learning of how not to do it, maybe. But I would love to track down those ones from Kaya and have a couple of those for people to watch.
One thing that I remember, so at the time that these were being developed, I was a staff support on the subcommittee, not a subcommittee member, but I attended many of the meetings and was more kind of a support and listening ear. But I remember around the scoring rubric was if a recommendation scored low overall, to your question, Kelsey, or were lots of 1s and 2s, it's not that we were wanting to say, oh, we started at a 1 and then we became a 10. It was more like, if it's a 1 or a 2, it's not good enough. Like, you have to go back and keep working on the recommendation, make sure that it is more inclusive, make sure you've thought about, most impacted communities, make sure you're thinking about accessibility or something, that it's more of an indication to the recommendation developers that there's more work to do and this isn't ready to be considered final.
Yeah, I like the term temperature check that
yes.
Kelly said. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I have my hand up, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry, Paula, please.
Show, because it's like blending in with my wall or something. So I really appreciate this document so much, and Kelly, thank you. Like, going through it again, I'm just like, it's so beautifully laid out and so wonderfully worded, and it's just like really, really lovely. So I don't think that there's anything wrong with the document up until the scoring rubric. I think it could, like I was saying in the chat, like I think it would be great to have a version of just the principles that's like, these 5 things in 5 boxes with like 1 sentence about what this means. And I think that would be an easy thing that's a visual that can just like be put up on a wall and be like, we can hold ourselves accountable to this. Once you get to the scoring rubric, I think things get dicey because it feels to me like the rubric it has this sort of like aura of science about it, but it's very subjective it's not really been used in a scientific way. Like, it's not meant to be used in a scientific way, but when you have like this rubric and numbers and all this stuff and you add them up, it starts to feel like, oh, this is like some validated scientific system that we're trying to be part of. And so like I feel conflicted about that because I'm like, well, what I've been trying to figure out is like, how can we have these simple, consistent ways that all of the subcommittees are feeling set up for success to center, you know, these principles, these 5 principles that we see as essential to a just transition and to our recommendations. But if you, the other thing about the rubric that I find just like a little ugh, is that it's so cumbersome. Like if you look at the number of actions in the initial cap, like you could not put, like if you put every single one of those actions through that entire rubric, that would take years. I mean, it's a lot. And I just would really love for there to be some just as sort of robust way for people to sit down and from beginning to end be able to say, are we including the right people? Are we integrating the just transition principles? Are we in without this sort of like aura of some kind of validated scientific system, which I think is not a good direction, but also just some consistency, just some, you know, and I think, you know, to Matthew's point, like plain language is, like, it's absolutely like democracy needs to be, presented and people need to be part of democracy in ways that are inviting and inclusive. So plain language is absolutely essential, to, you know, like interacting with the general public, but also like those of us, the public servants who are like the main sort of audience of this particular piece of writing and the way it's presented, like we also just need things in plain language that are simple that we can like very easily understand because as Kelly was saying before, like people are overwhelmed. We're all like, no matter who we are, we're overwhelmed with work. We're overwhelmed with information. We're overwhelmed with the burden of trying to do the right thing, which is, you know, it feels great when you do it, but there's always like, speaking for myself, like this always anxiety, like, did I do it right? Did I include the right people? Did I do it in a, you know, democratic way or whatever? So I feel like, you know, it's just the expectations of that rubric in particular are really high. And I'm not sure it's practical.
Yes, Sam.
I think it's interesting because like the standards that most town plans or state plans or whatever pieces have to go through are very similar and they are extremely cumbersome. And I like the idea of like, I think we all see the utility in having something that people can go to, but maybe that rubric isn't quite it. But it does bring me back to the question of then what are like some key points? So maybe I feel like there's this give and take between most of us haven't been at other meetings to know how all the other folks are drafting and like what their process is. But I'm like, you know, for example, if they're each going to pick their priorities and they're putting things off, checking them off as completed, then before they check completed, they should ask like, who did this impact? Who did this miss? Do we need to, instead of marking it complete, say, like, we need to do the highest priority of missed communities, like communities that we got wrong or communities that we missed before moving on, but then the rest of it can be sort of deprioritized. Like maybe it's narrowing instead of complete. Like, so for example, looking today, there's a bunch of things that were like completed that were about weatherization. And it's like, we still don't have a program that includes, you know, mobile home residents, and the renter program doesn't include all utility areas. So like, I wouldn't call that complete, especially because those are some of our most vulnerable folks in the state, right? So like, I think it's like those, maybe there are some process moments and with key questions that are just like, who was impacted by the action? Who was missing? How does that affect where the priority goes? Like maybe we just need to understand what the process that they're using to write the chapters is, and then write in a few key moments in that process of where they can ask themselves like 2 or 3 questions. And that's it. So if they're doing priorities, like marking actions status of actions first, then maybe it's that, and then maybe it's prioritizing those actions. Maybe we have one or two questions about, you know, people and how they're considering inequities, and how they're going to shield people who are already most vulnerable from the further burdens, and how they're going to perpetuate benefits specifically to them. And then maybe there's a thing for the actual chapter that it goes through, and maybe that's a few more questions, but maybe still not that much. So I'm like, if we could have that clear process of, and maybe the problem is that there isn't one, and maybe I'm getting the sense that that is the case. And maybe that's where, like, if we propose this and are a little bit nebulous, then maybe that could help spur there being a unified process. Because I'm getting the sense that this is a big issue, and I feel like we can have these conversations all we want in this group, but if we don't propose something and get in on the conversations fast enough in the others, like, I don't really know how much of an impact we're going to have, because if they're already starting to mark actions as like complete and mark their top 5, like, I think we're losing our, I don't want to be like hyperbolic, but yeah, I don't know. That seems like it would be really useful. And then we could dive back into the rubric and maybe to the graphics and other things, which are super important, but I don't know.
Yeah, go ahead, Kelly.
There was some chatter about this in the chat, but also to say it out loud, when we first were working on the climate action plan, we were developing these principles as the other subcommittees were working on their plans. And so it was a weird, tight timeline. And so we were trying to do the principles, make sure that they were really good and get them done as fast as possible, so that we could at least get them in front of other subcommittees while they were still somewhere in the earlier stages of developing their plans. But it kind of had to go in parallel, and that was frustrating. So we have an opportunity now because of this. And so what you said, Sam, is like, let's get out there, let's not delay this time. And because the climate action plan is being revised, but a lot of the subcommittees haven't really started much of their work yet. So that's the idea of getting in there in the summer, being there, helping people use them. So yeah, and then the other thing in the chat was about, there was a training that I think Kaya did it, I can't remember for sure, with the full council on the Just Transitions Guiding Principle. There were several times that we went over this document with the full council, but that was over 3 years ago. We've had a lot of turnover. So definitely time for another refresher. And I don't think we've fully planned our meeting for the next council meeting. I think there's some, I don't think it's fully finalized, but there's a steering committee meeting on Monday. So I would recommend having a refresher of this as part of that. And I don't know if we have an idea of who should go through it, but maybe just a refresher of this document and the concepts in it from someone who can maybe speak more eloquently about it than I. That I think would be a really, really good idea to get this front and center for folks as they go into their summer work. And we could weave in also a little bit of the idea of, like, these liaisons are here. They're not here to take all the equity stuff off your brain, but they're here to remind you of the equity stuff that you know you care about and might just not always be thinking about first and foremost.
Something that I'm kind of thinking about, and both seeing in the conversation and in the chat, is that, and maybe it's still a question, as to whether the Just Transition Guiding Principles and the assessment questions as more of like a mental framework and strategy, as opposed to like a tool to evaluate every recommendation, evaluate and score every recommendation. So I'm just trying to get a sense of, like, because we could now go in to do the exercise and the kind of the example with the weatherization recommendation, but it's almost making me think that we might need either, maybe we just try it and see what feels most appropriate for people. But I'm now starting, I'll just admit personally, starting to think that it's not so much about responding to every question around a particular recommendation, but just sort of bringing this mental perspective to the conversation of, and I remember a previous co-chair of this subcommittee saying things that like our job as a liaison or as a subcommittee, just transition subcommittee member, is to ask hard questions, not necessarily to have the answers or to score the recommendations as like meeting the mark and falling short of the mark, but instead to just be like, have we thought about impacted communities? Have we thought about the future implications on others, and just sort of holding space or inserting space to that kind of consideration. So anyway, that's sort of on my mind as we take a few minutes to go into the exercise. I know, Paula, that yeah, you're going to have to hop off. A few others may as well. We don't have the full time that we had thought to do the activity. Does it make sense to still break? I will admit I'm kind of questioning whether it still makes sense to break into groups at this point, but
Oh, I don't know if it makes sense. I don't know if we'd really have the
Yeah.
time to do it.
I think so either.
I was thinking though, with
Yeah.
those questions, even though we don't have time to work on them as a group, like those could be questions liaisons could bring to the subcommittees. Like every
Right.
time you're given a chance to speak, just ask one of the questions, you know, and then just like, and I think we were hoping during this discussion, we would like get to like, what are the 1 or 2 or 3 questions that we think like really would get the most value by asking. So we just don't have that opportunity. But you know, I think if people are worried about how am I going to participate, what should I ask, what should I say, like use the questions.
Yeah, like I invite this group to think about, and then you ask the question. Yeah.
Yeah, and that leaves space for like just human contextualized judgment of like, okay, here's the question that's popping out at me as the one that needs to be asked in this particular context, in this particular moment. Yeah. It doesn't like completely solve the self-assessment kind of.
No, that's still
but it's
another
like, that's a great
conversation.
idea. Like, I'm totally going to do that, even though I'm not an official liaison to
Yeah,
anybody.
that's what I would do. I just go
Yeah,
and bring the
it's a great
question.
idea.
I think the accountability piece, I think that's the one, that's what we struggle with. It's like, how do we know subcommittees have actually done this and thought about it? And I don't know what kind of like how would you prove that? You could give yourself a number, but that's not like really proof. Maybe it is.
Well, maybe even in the accountability and restorative section, it is like asking the question of, have you considered unintended impacts of this action or of the implementation of this recommendation? Or, you know, did you bring the lens to the conversation that our current system is inequitable and racist? Like, have you considered that like status quo operation is going to cause harm to people?
Yeah, and there's also the issue of like all this community engagement work where we're getting feedback back and we need to be folding it in at every point in the process from the beginning to the end. And like, how do you hold yourself accountable for that? We still don't have an answer to that either. Yeah, it's really hard to be accountable and to like tell people we're going to be accountable to you in this way based on what you've told us. But we need to, you know, obviously we need to do it.
I think we're going to know a lot more too once you all start going to the subcommittee meetings. If you haven't been.
Yeah. Sam, you look like you're thinking.
I wasn't sure if I should say it or not. I guess I'm still not sure what we're charged with. And I don't want to be a broken record, but I feel like having a clear set of like this is what we're doing, because would be really helpful. And I get, we're getting a lot of stuff about community engagement, but CBI is doing the community engagement, and we will have that meeting with them, but then like that will operate without the committee, right? So what's our, like, I just am not, I'm a little bit struggling with it's like, what are we doing? Which I think is fine. But
I think that's what we're trying to figure out is what are we doing in this iteration of Just Transition Subcommittee? Because
Yeah.
the first thing we had was develop the guiding principles. Done. Now what?
right.
And it's iterated over time. And now that we have a new version of the climate action plan with a deadline that's coming up, now we have to sort of reinvent ourselves again. So that's sort of an open question, I think.
If it's helpful, I can frame up what I'm seeing as the subcommittee members' roles. Again, knowing that I am not a subcommittee member, but staff support. Would that be helpful?
Yeah.
Okay. So for those who are liaisons, getting comfortable with the guiding principles for a just transition and understanding how, which we'll probably be understanding through doing, but bringing those principles to the committees that you're liaisoning with, I think is one really clear thing. In terms of the engagement and like, what are you doing there? There's the offer, the invitation for subcommittee members to join in on the events that Consensus Building Institute is going to. There's the invitation to share with us events that you think we should be going to speak with frontline impacted communities. So those are two tangible actions. Again, as Matthew noted, I don't know at this time whether that like going out into communities can be compensated with per diem, but that invitation is there. So those are some tangible things. And then as Paula was just saying of like, how are we getting, we've got a lot of, we've got a whole lot of community input that's been gathered, both from the original engagement done from 2021 when the first CAP was being enacted, and from the past year of the Consensus Building Institute's work. That engagement is only as good as if it gets read. So that would be another sort of role that you all can play in your liaison roles of one, getting familiar with that engagement so you have a sense of what's been heard. And then two, like reminding people on the other subcommittees, hey, you have the quarterly reports. Go read them if you haven't yet. Hey, I remember that I saw a theme of the engagement work that has been done has been that EVs aren't affordable. Like, are we thinking about that? So those are the things that I see. It doesn't necessarily mean it's an exhaustive list, but hopefully that's a little more tangible.
Does that feel, Sam? Did that get towards, and others, does that get towards kind of a bit more concrete role?
I didn't mean it in like a bad way. I just yeah. And I had reread the legislation, and it does really talk about action. So I just was yeah, just wondering, but I think, yeah, no, that's fine. That's great.
So I'll just note on the action piece, and again, I don't mean to bring up old kind of conversations that may no longer be relevant, but I think that this subcommittee has had some, like a bit of an existential crisis of like, what do we do? What is our role? How do we function? And part of it is related to capacity. And so I think there had been a question of like, really, is this Just Transition Subcommittee going to provide all the trainings to the counselors and to the steering committee? And the reality was like, no, I don't think people at this level, that any of us really have the capacity to do that. And so I think the same question came up of like, really, is the Just Transition Subcommittee members going to like take recommendations and run them through the rubric and give scores and give feedback? on every series of kind of suggestions that are being brought forth for the updated climate action plan. And again, I think the reality was like, I'm not sure that our subcommittee members have that degree of capacity. That doesn't mean that it won't happen sometimes or that some people might not find that time. But I think that that's what's been challenging a little bit about the charge, is to figure out like how action oriented do folks have the capacity to contribute. And so I kind of like, Sophie, what you provided, which is a little bit of like, you know, reading material that comes from the quarterly reports around the community engagement themes, becoming familiar enough with the just transition guiding principles that as a liaison, you can ask questions, considering whether events are things that you want to participate in and have capacity for, or other events and locations that you think would be a important place to capture unheard voices that have not yet been incorporated into the thinking thus far. I will say for me as a subcommittee member, those feel like those are tangible and like achievable roles that I can imagine taking on in the next few months.
That's helpful, Abby. And as you were listing those, I thought of one other, which is what you said, Sam, of are there questions that we should be asking people as Climate Action Office and Consensus Building Institute are out talking to people on the ground? What questions do you, like, we'll ask this of the other subcommittees as well, but just transitions members can also provide those ideas as well. So there's one more.
Oh, wait, hold on. Oh,
So yeah, Mona.
Yeah, I just have also one suggestion is we need also to know the impact, of this guiding principle. Is it doing actually what it's supposed to be doing or not? And do we have, what are the methods that we are measuring impact of this guiding principle? And all of the others, just subcommittees, is it doing what's supposed to be doing or not? Because if we're not having an impact, then what is the benefit of it?
Yeah, Sophie, are you feeling like we have metrics of measurement for, are we seeing improvement? Are we achieving certain objectives?
I can't remember who this conversation was with, but and if it was one of you, remind me, please, who we talked about like having subcommittees do kind of a survey at the end of their process this year to ask them, like, can you tell us a little bit about how the engagement results that you heard impacted your climate action planning process? So we can hear from them, like, hey, how were you using that? And maybe we let them know at the beginning that we're gonna send this survey at the end. I don't know if that is helpful or feels too, yeah, I don't know. But that was a conversation I had with somebody that I thought was a good idea. And I welcome other ideas. Again, I'm not a subcommittee member.
Yeah, thanks for that. It's a good suggestion. I don't know if
Yeah,
that,
Sophie, could they do that now on the previous plan?
Oh, that would be interesting. Like, do it now and then like could be able to compare the results.
Or it's like, how did you do? If they considered it the first time, I don't know. At least it'll get them thinking about it more than just
Right.
all after the fact.
Yeah. Was it you that I had this conversation with?
We had some version of that conversation. Because I was talking about how we measure things. Yeah.
yeah, Kelly, I see your hand.
As we're looking at the time, I had an idea for what we could potentially do based on the exercise we had planned, but make it I hate to say the word big homework, but I think this would be a really useful homework because I think it would be cool to pretend we're on the cross sector mitigation subcommittee. Don't have to know what that is or whatever. That's fine. But we are, let's say we're putting out a recommendation, which they did, that we need to weatherize a bunch of homes. We need to do that to help with emissions reduction, right? Because any home that's leaky and you're heating it via pretty much any source, even if it's electric heat pumps, it's going to be a waste of energy. It's going to be emitting CO2. So we need to weatherize homes. How do we do that? Use that sort of basic thing. And I found the actual recommendation from the Climate Action Plan, just the synopsis of that, and say, go through the guiding principles, see how you would like to use them, and have us each do it individually, and then come back together and see how that felt, what we found useful in the guiding principles document and what was maybe not useful, and also see where we have commonalities and differences in using the document, and also in just how we thought about this idea. Does that make any sense to folks? I just thought that might be a nice way to do the exercise, and sort of one of those when we all do it together, we might have that group think thing, whereas this keeps us separate and we come back together and go, wow, you thought that? Oh my gosh, I would never have thought of that. I don't know. Does that seem like a good way that we could get at what we've been trying to work on all this time and not getting anywhere on? Because I think what we would do is we'd come back together and we'd be able to say, hey, other subcommittees, this is a great way to use these guiding principles. This is what we found from doing this as like a test. We would recommend this process. And if we do this and we're like, that was terrible, then we could say, we recommend not doing this.
And for folks' reference, I put that action that Kelly's talking about in the chat.
Yeah.
And that can
And
be
I
found
was-
on page 93 of the Climate Action Plan.
I copied it into a document, and I was going to maybe like put a little, hey, use, like, I was gonna maybe drop in like a, here's your homework thing, and say, use the guiding principles, figure out how you look at this, look at the guiding principle document, use them for this recommendation. How did that feel? What worked? What didn't? I don't know. I thought that might be a way that we could wrap our heads around how we can help other subcommittees as liaisons, like as if you pretend that this entire thing wasn't already fleshed out in the previous climate action plan, that I was sitting there in the cross-sector mitigation subcommittee as they were coming up with this action and feeling the same way Sam is feeling, maybe. I don't know, like, what do I say? How do I know if you're doing the right thing? I have these guiding principles, but it's like, it's so hard. And so I only had the gut instinct at certain occasions to say, hey, what about this thing? But they were very much thinking about equity, and I didn't necessarily know. And so I think that's where it takes a lot of minds looking at the same thing to notice where your blind spots are, because we all have them.
Okay, I'm going to do a quick rundown of, I think, I'm sorry, Kelly.
Carrie just said maybe a smaller group of us could do the exercise together outside of our normal meeting time. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what I was suggesting, because it seems like a hard homework assignment to just do on your own.
Yeah, my thought was like, do it on your own, at least briefly, look through it. And then, but I also agree, maybe just coming back together as a smaller group and coming back with notes to the larger group would be.
Yeah, I'm happy to set something up outside of this if there's people who are interested in doing it together. And maybe some people are
Okay, so I'm hearing Carrie's willing to set up a smaller group to take a stab at this exercise. Yeah, Matthew.
Yeah, some of us, already at are at the mental break, at their mental capacity break. It's just, to me, it's like unless it's plain language friendly, it's you know what, it's bye bye to me, because I don't want to participate in anything that's overly complex. As you may know, that's not very fair on me or individuals across that have learning capacities. Like I have a neurodiversity issue. And if plain language ain't there, how can I compute of what you're saying at this point?
Mm-hmm.
So I know most people like to do this, probably do this on their day given, like to do this type of exercise, but this exercise is not for the faint of heart, not for me, at least, Like I said, I'm just trying to put the accessibility first, for my accommodation needs. And like I said, I'll catch you. Maybe we'll work for better. Maybe we should do better exercises that does include more inclusivity than trying to be complex about this, because to me, it's like I'm already wiped out. Thank you very much. But yeah, like I said, it's 6 o'clock. I enjoyed the time being here. Like I said, I'll try my best to keep my mental capacity of what you say, the best of my abilities, but literally I'm just wiped out at this point just by hearing all of this. But thank you.
I just want to say thanks, Matthew, for this, because Belen language is can benefit everyone. It's not only you. It can benefit everyone. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for your time and attention and focus this evening. It is a long day. It is an intense meeting with a lot of information that's shared. So thank you for your showing up and staying engaged for as long as you were able. We'll see you sometime in June.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Thank
Have a
you.
great evening.